Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review today. I'm here to tell you all about the latest album from Neaera, out February 28th on Metal Blade Records. This album has 11 tracks, 44 minutes in length, and this is the band's 7th full-length studio album. 7th full-length studio album following 7 years in between records. But within those 7 years, a lot of things happened. The band broke up back in 2015, and then in 2018 they put a couple of shows together, and I believe that those shows were the igniting force behind them deciding to release another album and getting the boys back together into the studio. And let me tell you this album does not disappoint anybody that's been looking forward to an album and crossing their fingers and hoping that the band would get back together. This album is a force of nature, absolutely destructive and uncompromising from beginning all the way to the end. Now, when you look at the record and you start to think about the components that make this record this impactful, this intensive and aggressive, I really feel like there's three elements at play here: structure, sound, and vocals. Having said that, the structure and sound are really intertwined, so it's kind of hard to talk about one without mentioning the other, because I really feel like the way the album structure flows and the way the songs are structured really play well to the sound that the individual songs have and then the overall album has. But let's talk about the structure without going too much into the sound. It's going to be really hard. I really feel like through this review I'm going to lose myself in between structure and sound because, like I said, the two are so intertwined. But the album starts off with an intro track, and perhaps the only song on the album that has a little bit of an atmosphere, that has a little bit of a sense of calm, at least a calm before the storm, because after that opening intro track, the album is absolutely aggression and intensity all the way through. And that is something that, in my opinion, really dominates and really spreads throughout the other 10 tracks. You could see that there's differences in approach from a song to song basis, but that intensity and aggression and heaviness that you get from song 2 to song 11, it never goes away. They're perhaps delivered in a different style, in a different format, with a different package, if you will, but those elements are present on every single song that comes at you on this record. The way that aggression is delivered, to me, is going to be key, because you're going to get really different style formats on a track-by-track basis while keeping the consistency of having that intensity and aggression all the way through at a very high level. So what you end up getting is an album that, from a structural perspective, is very linear in its approach. There's no dips, there's no roller coaster ride, there's no ups and downs. There's just this high level of intensity that stays from that second song all the way through. So from a structural perspective, it's very linear in that approach. But then when you look on an individual song basis, that also doesn't change. Every song has a very dynamic, has a very heavy, has a very high level of intensity and aggression built in within each single song. The way it changes is how the song is put together in terms of the sound, how the sound comes at you, the way they use the guitars, the way they use the drums, the way they mix the vocals. All of these elements that incorporate the overall sound of the record is where the differences are on a track-by-track basis. So you're going to get 11 songs, 10 songs if you don't count the intro. You're going to get 10 songs that have a very similar high intensity level, but have a very different way of giving it to you, have a very different internal structure approach to it. So to me, this is a way you create a record that never dips, that there's no breaks, there's no breathing room, if you will, that is just very high octane from beginning to end without sounding repetitive. Because each single song gives you something different, gives you a different approach, gives you a different feel, a different way to incorporate a guitar riff, or a different way to incorporate a breakdown, a different way to incorporate verses and chorus. So the dynamic structures within the songs are different, while the intensity is always very high. And that is true on every single track, and then obviously that bleeds into the album, into the overall sound that the record has, and then it's true all the way through the whole record. And sometimes in this record it's very easy to forget how melodic, going more into the sound now, stepping a little bit away from the structure. With this record, it's very easy to forget how melodic and methodic some of the sound on the album is. Because the album, to me, has two speeds, fast and faster. And as far as heavy is concerned, it's heavy and heaviest. I mean, this is an album that is just all about aggression and intensity. So the melody and melancholy that you're going to find on some of the tracks is very well hidden, but it's still present on every single song. And perhaps those are the two condiments, if you will, within the sound, within the overall sound of the album that really change their place within the tracks in order to give the tracks a different feel while never losing the overall picture that they have and that the album has. So to me, that dynamic between melody and melancholy and how it interacts with the aggression and intensity of the record, it's really important for this album to work, and like I said previously, not to sound repetitive, because that would be something easy to do or easy to happen when you have an album that is this intense, that is this aggressive. As far as the vocals are concerned, I really like what they did with the vocals. I really like the dynamic between the harsh, the more screaming vocals, and even the darker vocals. Even some of the layering of the vocals is really interesting, and it works really well for this album. Having backing vocals giving a little bit more of a robust sound, giving a little bit thickness, a little bit more texture to the tracks. So everything surrounding the vocal track on this album was something that really impressed me. They really knew which style to go with in order to get the most out of the songs, but also to create a different internal dynamic within the tracks so that you wouldn't get that repetitiveness going from track to track, even from a vocal perspective. Because they did, like I explained, certain elements to change the sound, the overall sound and feel in order for the songs not to be repetitive. But it's also important to change that on a vocal perspective so you don't get the same nuances in verses and choruses and opening of the tracks and closing of the tracks. So to me, it's really interesting to see how they used the vocal range within this album to really create different vocal dynamics on a track-by-track basis, what allows the songs to feel very different while having some, if not all, of the same condiments present on every single track. Overall, this album is absolutely phenomenal. One of the heaviest and more relentless records that I heard so far this year. There is no pauses, there is no breaks, there is no catching your breath, there is no dips, nothing. This album is just high octane, high energy, high intensity, high aggression from not the opening salvo, because like I said, there is that opening track that has a little bit more melancholic atmosphere to it, but from the second track all the way to track number 11, this album takes absolutely no prisoners. It's just pure raw power all the way through, from the sound and from the vocals, everything coming together to be absolutely destructive. I love this record, and like I said, one of the heaviest, if not the heaviest and most aggressive album I heard so far in 2020. Now, as far as songs are concerned, I really want to start off with Resurrection of Wrath, one of my favorite tracks. Killer riff. The dynamic between the riff and the drums on this song, it's really important, and it creates a very interesting dynamic in the verses of the song. It becomes absolutely destructive. It just has a lot of power to it. Great tempo, great intensity. It's a song that really carries that tempo and that intensity all the way through. The chorus pumps the brakes ever so slightly. There is a change, there's a dynamic change, there's a fluidity change within the chorus, and in my opinion that's important to create not a break, but to create a little bit of a bump, if you will, on the song. I really like how the drums come in very heavier, with the guitars adding a lot more melody in that chorus, and that's why you have this sense of a break from the verses into the chorus. The melody that the guitars have in the choruses are absolutely magnificent. I really like the addition of that melody. It really plays well with the vocal style in the chorus. You have this yin and yang between contrasting styles and sounds, and I really like the dynamic that gives the overall song. This allows the verses to really explode onto the track. Normally in songs like this, it's really the chorus that explodes onto the track. Here's the other way around. The chorus is kind of holding its energy down, and then when the verses come in, the verses really explode onto the track, giving this huge dynamic between verses and chorus, making the song really bombastic and really have this forward motion to it. Next, Carriers, my favorite song on the album. I just love this song, and one of the reasons I love this song is the chorus. But this is a song that opens up with a blistering tempo, tons of speed, tons of raw power. Then it morphs into more of a melodic riff that still keeps that forward momentum going, still keeps that tempo going, but it definitely changes the dynamic that the song has. That's without a doubt. The song gets broken down by this killer drums that just gives the song this incredible presence. I really like what they did there. They add them at two key points of the track to really break the flow of the track, but to give it some heaviness, slowing it down at the same time, almost like as a place setter for the aggression and the intensity that's going to come afterward. This song is one of those that really comes in two speeds, fast and faster, pretty much like the whole album. This is perhaps the song that better describes the whole album, because as far as heaviness is concerned, this song is also heavy and heavier. Like, I mean, this song is absolutely destructive. If there's one track on this album that makes you want to punch mountains, this song is it, because it just has so much melody, but at the same time it has so much aggression, so much intensity, just so much power into it from a vocal perspective, but also from a musical perspective. The drums are absolutely relentless on this track, sometimes pushing a little bit more into the background, not being noticeably as heavy as they are, but when they push into the forefront, when you feel the power of the drums, it's just absolutely bombastic. They just take over the song, they take over the track, and then the guitars just are a perfect supplement to that, and obviously the vocals really round it off with the aggressiveness that they have, that they really project onto the song. Last but not least, Lifeless, a very different track on this album, perhaps one of the tracks that in my opinion stands out for having a very different approach musically, one of those that distance themselves more than any other song on this record. It opens up with a riff that has a little bit of doom, a little bit of black metal into it, and then as the song progresses, that opening minute and a half of the song almost feels like a black metal song, or at least like a blackened death metal song. It has a little bit of that approach to it in terms of how the guitar riff sounds, but also how the drums really cooperate with that sounding riff. So I really like that opening. It has a different dynamic. Then the song merges more into a more groovy style guitar riff, become almost a groove metal song at that point. I really like that change. It's a very abrupt change, and you really feel like almost like the song breaks apart at that specific time. It's not a smooth transition. There's really a break within the track. The track becomes a lot more dense, a lot thicker. This specifically in the chorus, it really has this great thickness, this great texture to it. The fluidity and sound, heaviness and aggression is something that's a trademark of this song. You really find these three elements weaving in and out of the track as the track progresses, and really becoming the trademark that has the sound not only of this song, but the sound of the overall album, which is really the fluidity between those three elements. The song then returns more back to that blackened doom death metal sounding riff that's really ominous, has a really somber feel to it. So the song comes back to it, making it very well rounded, giving a sense of full circle, and finishing off almost as it started, with that same very methodic dark riff that you don't get in the middle of the track. In the middle of the track you get a lot more aggression, higher tempos, more intensity. But at the two ends, on the bookcase ends, you really get this dark and black metal style kind of riff that really merges well with the vocals and drums to give it even more of a black metal feel to this track. Absolutely loved it. Very different from every other track on the album, and because of its difference is why it really piqued my interest, and I put it in my top 3 tracks of this record. Alright guys, this is it for me. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. As always, I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care guys.